Hey guys, Chubbs here, back again with another ACS scripting tutorial, and today we're going to be taking a look at functions. Before we get into functions though, I just want to give you guys a quick tour of this little map that I've set up here. So we have a player start. You can also sort of see here there's a teleport destination on top of the player. We'll be getting to that here later. To the left of the player start, we have a sort of computer room here with some collectibles, but as you can see it's barred off. And there's also a switch just before you reach the bars. To the right of the player start, you can see that there is an exit, but it's sort of blocked off by these two Baron of Hell columns. And finally, directly ahead of the player start, we have this long hallway that leads to this sort of large bloody room with two Barons of Hell in it hiding behind columns. So to explain to you guys, basically the goal of this map is for the player to get inside this room, get the collectibles, go inside the bloody room, kill the Barons, and finally go to the exit. So killing the Barons is what's going to lower these columns and allow him to get to the exit. So we're going to be achieving this with the help of functions. So let's go ahead and pull up the script editor and let's talk about what functions are. So functions are an awful lot like scripts. Just like a script, you write a function and you basically give it code to execute. But there are some important differences, and we'll be getting into those here shortly. So first, as always, I'm just going to type the line that we always include at the top, and that is the pound sign or the number sign, include, space, and then inside quotations, zcommon.acs. And then we'll go down, and the first script that I want us to type is going to be pertaining to this hallway that leads to this sort of Baron den. So what I want us to do is just basically write a script that warns the player when he gets to this stretch of hallway here, and just tells him that there's a Baron den ahead and to be careful. So let's pull up the script editor again, and I'm going to start by typing a brand new script, and we're going to call this script Baron Den Warning. So this is just going to be a warning for the Baron Den. We're not going to be passing this script any information, so this is going to be a void script, and then we'll do an opening and closing brace, and here is where we're going to start to use functions. So what I want us to do is write a custom function that allows us to basically show like a warning or a notification in our game quickly and easily. This notification is going to be done with HUD message, but HUD message, as you've already seen, is a pretty long built-in function to type out. To type it out, just to show you here, we have to do HUD message, and then you can see this big list of parameters that it asks for. If we want to use this throughout this map at different places, it's going to be a real pain having to type out all that stuff over and over again. So we're just going to write a function that sort of does the HUD message work for us and just shortens it down. That way we can call the function, tell it what to type, and then it bothers with all of the HUD message details so that we don't have to. And you'll understand what I'm talking about here in just a second. So let's go ahead and let's sort of write that function. So to write a function, it's very similar to writing a script. You begin with the word function, space, and next, this is where it gets a little different, and we're not going to be working with this part of it right now, but the next thing you type here is basically the return value or the type of information that this function is going to return. You can return an integer, a boolean, but if you don't want to return anything, all you have to do is just type void, and that's what we're going to do for now. A function that doesn't return anything is an awful lot like a script, because scripts cannot return anything. This is one thing that functions can do that scripts cannot. Next, you need to type the function name, and unlike a named script, the name of the function does not go inside quotations. So this function, like I just said, is just going to be used to show some sort of notification or warning. So I'm going to call this function show notification. And also, notice the way that I type the function name. Notice how each word begins with a capital letter. This is referred to as Pascal case, and this is just a common convention in programming languages like C, C++, and C#. And you don't have to do it this way, but it is just a common convention, so just want to point that out. Finally, after the function name, just like with a script, you need to type the information or the parameters, or I should say arguments, that the script takes or the function takes. So if we want to pass in something, we would type the value and then the name of whatever we pass it. If we don't want to pass it anything, we would just type void. For now, we're just going to do void, but we are going to want to change this because we want to be able to customize the notification. But to simplify things, for now, I'm going to leave this at void. So this means that whenever we call this function, we're not passing it any information. So now, let's do an opening and closing brace just like with a script. And from this point on, you are basically working with it just like you would a script. So I'm just going to do a basic HUD message function that just prints a message on the screen. To recap what we've just done, we have written a custom function called showNotification. This function does not take in anything, and it also does not return anything, and we'll get to the return part here later on. And what this function does is it calls HUD message, it prints bear indent ahead on the screen, and based on our parameters that we've set up here, the message is going to be red. It's going to be near the middle of the screen up at the top. It's going to last about 2.5 seconds, and then it's going to fade out over the course of 0.3 seconds. So now that we've set this script up, let's just go ahead, or this function up, let's go ahead, go up here to our bear indent warning script, and let's call this function from within it. So to call a function, all you have to do is just type the function name, then open and close parentheses, and then if the function is supposed to take something, you type it here, but this one does not at current time. So we're just going to go to the end and do a semicolon. Click compile, and that's it. So one of the really nice things about functions is how easy it is to call them. You just type their name and the parentheses, and that's it. If you were to execute a script, then you would have to do like ACS underscore. If it were a named script, you'd have to do named execute. Then you'd have to type the name of the script and then these different arguments. And you can see how much longer that is to type out versus executing a function. It's just, for a function, it's just short and sweet to do it. I do want to, this just now reminded me though of another limitation that functions have. Unlike scripts, functions cannot delay. So although you write functions just like you would scripts, if we wanted to have like a HUD message appear and then do like a certain delay, like for about 3 seconds, and then do something else, this would not work because functions, for whatever reason, cannot contain delays. They can basically perform any action besides delays. So if you need to do delays, you have to do those within scripts. So anyways, we'll go ahead. Now that our bear indent warning script is executing the show notification function, we need to go ahead and execute the bear indent warning script somewhere in our map. Right now we don't have that set up anywhere. I did point out earlier though when I was showing you this map that I want it to be when the player enters this hallway. So we sort of have two ways to go about this. One way that's kind of obvious is to go to this line here and do a walkover line action. The problem with that approach though is that would trigger when we entered this hallway and also when we backed out of the hallway, because a line action doesn't care which way you're approaching, whether you're going in this way or coming out this way. As long as you cross the line, it's going to activate, and that's not really what I want. I only want this to happen when the player enters the hallway, not when he leaves it. Hey guys, just a quick heads up. When I first made this tutorial, I totally forgot that lines have an activation property you can check called front side only. This effectively turns them into one-way lines and would have totally solved this problem. There's nothing wrong with the method that I'm about to show you here, but if you'd rather just stick to using lines and line actions, you can do that and be just fine, just so long as you remember to check front side only underneath the line's activation properties. Thankfully, there's a really good way to get around that, and that is by using an actor intersector thing. So if we pull up the things list in thing mode, of course, we can go to the sector actions category, and you can see that there's a thing here called actor intersector. And basically, whichever sector you place this thing in, when you pull the thing up and go to its action tab, the action that you give it is what's going to be executed when you enter that sector. So this is really handy for scenarios like this where you only want something to happen when the player enters this sector, not when he leaves it. So the placement of this doesn't matter as long as it's somewhere in the sector. I'm going to put it close to the entrance here, and I'm going to pull up its actions again. We're going to say that when the player enters this sector, the action is script execute. We want it to be a named script, and of course the script is going to be Baron Den warning. So just another quick recap. When the player enters this hallway, it's going to trigger this. This is going to execute the Baron Den warning script, which in turn is going to call our show notification function. And that function, of course, is going to print Baron Den ahead on the screen. So let's go ahead and test it, and then we'll come right back. Okay, so you could see the message appear. So when the function was called, the message showed up, then it faded away. I wasn't happy with the size of the message though, so what I'm going to do is down here in the function, above where the message is called, I'm just going to put set font, and then I'm going to say big font. And this is just a built-in font, and this just makes it much larger, and that way it'll be easier to see. So let's go ahead. I'm just going to run it one more time. The text should be much larger now. Okay, so that was much better. So now that we are happy with the size of the text, we need to make a change to this function. Right now, this function is very inflexible. Basically, it only does one very specific thing. It just shows this specific message, and if you want a function that you can reuse a lot, something like this is not going to work. So what I want for us to do is to make it so that we can tell this function what to say. So instead of just having a string here that we explicitly type, we are instead going to pass this function a string. So instead of void, I'm going to say str for string, and then we're going to say that the string that we pass it is going to go by the name of notification text. And now instead of saying Baron Den ahead, I'm going to erase that, and after the S and the colon for string, we're going to replace it with notification text. So now whenever we call this function, we're going to give it a string, and that string is going to be displayed inside of the HUD message. So because of this change, we need to go up here to our Baron Den warning script where we're calling this function, and instead of having open parentheses, we need to give it a string inside here. So I'm just going to say warning, and then I'm going to do a backslash, or I think that's a forward slash maybe, and then the letter N, which starts a new line. That's just going to like skip a line, and then I'm going to say Baron Den ahead. So now whenever we execute this script, it's going to call the show notification function. It's going to pass it this string, and that string is then going to be displayed via the HUD message function. So now that we've compiled, let's go ahead and let's run it this time, and let's see what happens. Alright, so that was perfect. So you can now see that we have quickly made this function far more flexible. So now anytime we have another script and we want to show a notification, all we have to do is just type show notification and give it some text. That's it. And notice how short and easy this is to type. This is so much easier than having to do set font and then type out all the HUD message stuff. It's short and sweet. It's easy to read. And that's one of the cool things about functions is you can do something like this to make it easier on yourself and make it easier to reuse code that you think is going to be common. Before we finish though, I want to add one more sort of like bit of flair to this function. I'm not happy with it just being text. I also want there to be some sort of audio associated with it. So I'm going to make it so that we give this a warning sound, but I also want the warning sound to be an option. I don't want it to be a mandatory thing. So instead of passing it just a string, we're going to do a comma, and we're going to pass it one more thing. We're going to pass it a Boolean, which can be true or false, and this Boolean is just going to be called notification sound. So whenever we call this function, we can type true if we want to play the sound, and then false if we don't want to. And I'm going to get to the sound here in just a second. In fact, I'll go ahead and show you guys something real quick. So, well, we didn't finish it, so it's not going to compile, but we're going to come back to this here in just a second. Let me show you guys this sound here. So I went ahead of time and I got us a sound to use. I went to the website called Free Sound and I found this sound called Beep Warning. It was uploaded by the user who goes by the name of Samster Birdies. And I also sort of shortened the sound a little bit so it doesn't sound exactly like this. So let me pop open Slade and I'm going to open my WAD here. And this is the sound. I just called it alert, and I'm going to go ahead and play it so that way you guys can sort of preview it. So that is the sound that I'm going to want to play whenever we show that notification. Again, it's just called alert. So it's going to be important that we remember that exact name. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to close this in Slade, and we'll go back to our WAD. Let's go back to the script editor and get back to where we just were. So getting back on track, we just added the notification sound Boolean as the second piece of information that we're now going to pass to this function. And so what I'm going to do is inside the function, after we have shown the HUD message, I'm just going to use a basic conditional statement that asks whether or not notification sound is true. So I'm going to say if notification sound equals true, so if the sound should be played, then we're just going to say I'm going to type a built-in function here called ambient sound. This is just a built-in function that plays a sound regardless where the player is. So this sound is not positioned somewhere in the world. It's just going to basically be played game-wide. And then you can see that it asks for the name of the sound, and the sound that I imported was called alert, so that's what I'm going to type, alert. And next is volume, and I think this ranges from 0 to 127, with 127 being the highest. I don't want it to be too loud, so I think I'm just going to make it 90. So it'll still be fairly loud, but it won't be max volume. And then I'll do a semicolon. And next, before we finish this off, we need to go up here to our barren warning script, and where we're calling this function, we are sending it or giving it the string for the notification text, but we are not yet telling it whether or not to play the notification sound. So we need to add that. So I'm going to do a comma after our text that we're sending it, and I'm going to say true because for this warning, I do want to play that alert. But later on, I do want to have some notifications that pop up that don't have the alert. We're going to get to that here later. So I'm going to compile. You can see we didn't have any problems. So again, just to cover this real quick, whenever we execute the barren warning script, we are calling the show notification function. We are giving that function this text to be showed via HUD message, and we're also giving it a value of true for notification sound. So if we give it true, because of this logic here, that means that the sound's going to be played. If we gave it false, then this line here would evaluate to false, and this code would not run, so the sound would not be played. So now whenever we cross into this hallway and activate that script, we should see the message and hear the alert sound. So let's go ahead and let's test the map, try it out, and see if the sound plays, and we'll be right back. Alright, so that worked perfect, and we're just going to do one more test just to show that it works. So let's pretend that we didn't want the alert to play. Let's go to our bear and den warning script, and instead of true for the notification sound, I'm just going to test it and type false. So now let's see, and if it works correctly, the sound should not play. Alright, so that's perfect. So we now have a flexible function that we can use in a bunch of different ways. I'm going to change it back to true for the alert sound, but we now have a function that is easy to type. We can tell it what to say, and we can also tell it whether or not we want to play an alert. So that's going to be very handy for finishing up this map. So we are pretty much done with the warning here in the hallway. So now what I want us to do is focus our attention over here on this set of bars that is blocking off this computer room that has the different collectibles in it. I want us to make it so that when we flip this switch, these bars lower, and then a player receives a notification that tells him that this supply room has been unlocked. So now that we have written our show notification function, this should be really easy to do. So let's go ahead. I'm going to type a brand new script. And to keep my functions and scripts organized, what I like to do is put my scripts near the top and then put the functions below. This is not a requirement, but it's just something I like to do, just to know that if I need to access my functions, they will all be grouped together at the bottom. And then if I need to look at my scripts, they're all going to be grouped together at the top. So for our new script here, this is going to be for that switch that will lower the bars for the supply room. I'm just going to call this script unlock supply room, just to make it easy to understand. And I also gave it void because we're not going to be passing it any info. And all we want this to do is first to show a notification. We're going to let the player know that the supply room has been unlocked. So we're going to do show notification. The text that we're going to pass it is just supply room unlocked. And then we don't want the alert sound to play because in this case I don't think it would make a whole lot of sense. So we're just going to type false. And we're not done yet because we need to lower those bars. And you can see that those have a tag of 1. I went ahead and did that ahead of time. So we're just going to use a built-in function to handle that. So we're just going to say floor underscore lower to lowest. And you can see it just takes a tag and a speed. The tag is going to be 1. And I want this to happen pretty quickly. So for speed, I'm going to type 64. That should be really fast. So that's all we have to do. You can see how short and sweet that was thanks to our custom function that we wrote. So now we just need to tie this script to that switch. So I'm going to go into line mode, pull up the switch's actions, give it an action of script execute, if I could type it correctly. There we go. It's a named script, and the script we're going to execute is unlock supply room, and it's just going to be when player presses use. This is not going to be repeatable because there's no need for that. So everything should be set up. We'll go ahead and test it and be right back. Okay, so far so good. So we have 2 instances now of our show notification function. When we unlock the supply room here, it shows up on the screen and it does not have the alert sound. And then we have this warning hallway where it tells us that a bear and den is ahead and the warning sound does play. So we're off to a great start. Now, the next thing that I want us to move on to is to handle these barons. So I want it to make it so that the exit here is basically barred off until we kill these barons. So to handle the barons' deaths, what we're going to do is we're going to make use of a function return value. So now we're going to sort of get into that part. And this is the part that's different from scripts. So let's pull up the script editor. And before I start writing a new script, I just want to show you guys, I went ahead of time, and if you look down at the bottom of the screen, actually, for some reason, these guys have a script attached to them. I might have been doing this when I was testing, and I just forgot to take it off of them. Okay, there we go. So both of these barons have a tag of 666, so that's how we're going to identify them. And so what we're going to do is we're going to make it so that they both have a script attached to them that executes when they are killed. So let's pull up the script editor again, and let's write that script. So I'm going to put this script below the unlock supply room script. We're going to call this script, just call it Baron Death. I think that's the one that I accidentally still had on them. And we're not going to pass this any information, so we're just going to say void. And here's the interesting part. So whenever the barons are killed, we want them to execute the script, and we want to be able to check whether or not all of the barons have died. If they have all died, then we want to wait just for a short amount of time, and then we want to teleport the player back to this main room because otherwise he's going to be stuck down in here. If you look, you can see there's no stairs or doors or anything. So when the player has killed both of these guys, he's going to see a message, and then he's going to be teleported back here. So again, we're going to be making use of a function return value for this. So let's I'm actually going to go below our show notification function, and I'm going to type a new function here. So we're going to type function, and instead of void for the return value, this is going to be returning a Boolean. So we're going to say bool for the return value, and the name of this function is going to be called all barons dead. So this that sort of describes what this function does. This function just determines whether or not all of the barons have been killed. We're going to make the arguments or parameters void because we're not going to be passing this function anything. And then we're going to give it the opening and closing braces. And then inside here is where it's going to get interesting. So the first thing I'm going to do, we'll see. Since we're going to be returning a Boolean variable, the first thing I'm going to do is create a Boolean inside this function. I'm going to call it result, and this is going to be the result of the test that we're going to be performing. And so what we're going to say is whenever you kill a Baron of Hell, we want to count how many are left. So we're going to say if thing count, and this is a built-in function. The type of thing we don't care about, but the ID we want to be 666 because that's what both of these barons have. So if the count of things with the tag of 666 is greater than 0, in other words, if there's at least one baron alive whenever we have killed a baron, then we want the result to be false because that would mean that all of the barons are not dead. Otherwise, the result will be true. And once we're finished checking this logic here, we want to return what the result is. And this is going to be a little confusing, but I'm going to go back over this here very quickly. So whenever a baron is killed, we're going to execute this function, and this function is going to ask whether there's at least one thing with a tag of 666 alive. If there is, then the result is false because there's at least one baron left. Otherwise, the result is true. And then it's going to return whatever the result is. So in other words, it's going to be returning either a true or a false. So in the Baron Death script, what I'm going to say is each time you kill a Baron, if all of the Barons are dead, and I'm going to go back over this also here just a second. We want to show a message, so I'm actually just going to do show notification. I'm going to use our function that we called. And for the string, I'm just going to say all Barons dead. And then I'm going to do the new line with the N. And then I'm going to say teleporting to start, because we want the player to teleport back, and I don't want there to be a sound for this. And in fact, I'm also going to have just a short delay before the message appears. So we're going to do delay, and this is going to be about 2 seconds. So when you kill a Baron, if all of the Barons are dead, in other words, if true is returned from this, then we're going to wait 2 seconds. Show the user that all of the Barons are dead, and then we're going to wait, let's say about 3 seconds, and we're going to teleport the player back to this teleport destination. And if I pull up the teleport destination here, if you look down at the bottom, I've given it a tag of 1. Let me put the player back to where he was. So the teleport destination has a tag of 1. So below the last delay, I'm going to use the teleport function, and the ID of the teleport destination is 1. We are not using a sector tag. This is optional. And no source fog. This basically is whether or not there's teleport fog. If you type 1, there is not fog. If you type 0, there is fog. I want there to be fog, so I'm going to type 0. And I think we are done. We may have missed something, but we'll check it out here just a little bit when we test it. We did compile without errors, but what I want to do is go over this more thoroughly, because I don't think I explained it well earlier. So I'm going to go by it sort of step by step and explain to you guys what's happening. So let's act like we're playing the game. First of all, actually, let me go to these Barons. Let me give them the action of script execute always, which is guaranteed to run even if you kill them with even if you kill more than one enemy with one shot. And I'm going to give them the Baron Death script. So now that I've got that out of the way, going back to my example I was about to give you, let's say that we drop into this room and we kill one of those Barons. When that happens, the Baron Death script is executed. When the Baron Death script is executed, it asks if all Barons are dead. And the result of all Barons are dead is based on this return value. So if we go down to the all Barons dead function, you can see that it's asking whether or not the thing count of tags with 666 is greater than 0. And that means if there's at least one alive, if that's true, it returns false. If there aren't any things left with the tag of 666, it's going to return true, because that would mean all the Barons are dead. And depending on what this evaluates to, that is the value it's going to return. So that's what's ultimately going to end up here. So going back to my example again, if we kill one Baron, the all Barons dead, this part here is going to evaluate to false, because all of the Barons are not dead. And as a result, this part is not going to run. If, however, we first kill this one and then kill this one, once we've killed the second Baron, this part will evaluate to true, and that's when we'll have a short delay. It'll tell us all the Barons are dead. We have another delay, and then it teleports us back to the start. So basically what you should take away from this is that because the all Barons dead function returns a value, we can put it in place of some sort of conditional statement here, because this is going to be true or false depending on what this function returns. So I hope that's clear to you. I hope that doesn't confuse you. But if you aren't sure about it, if you have a question, feel free to comment below. But we'll go ahead, we'll compile this again, make sure we don't have any problems, and let's give this a shot. What I'm going to do, I'm going to test the map. I'm going to unlock this room, grab the plasma rifle, run in here, and kill both these barons. And when I do that, let's see if we get that message, and let's see if it warps us back to the start like it should. Alright, so it worked great. So when we killed the first Baron, nothing happened. But when we killed the second Baron, if I go to our Baron death script, the moment we killed the second Baron, all Barons dead returned true, and as a result, this portion of the code executed. So we delayed, it showed us the message, delayed again, then we teleported back to the start. And something else I also wanted to point out that I meant to point out earlier is notice that I'm not saying if all Barons dead equals true. You can actually do this either way. You can just have it like this, or you can do equals true. Those are basically the same thing. I also wanted to show you guys something else. If you want to check whether it's false, you can either do equals false, or you can do an exclamation at the beginning. This is the not operator, and that's almost like saying if all the Barons are not dead. So this is checking whether it's false instead of true. Now that our Baron death script is working, we know now that we can detect whether all the Barons are dead. So that means that really the last step that we have is to unlock the exit. Right now we're not doing anything with the exit. So this is the part of the map that we're going to shift our focus to. What I want is so that when we enter this sector right here, if we have killed all of the Barons, these columns lower and we can exit. If we have not killed the Barons, then we're going to receive a notification that tells us that that condition has not been met. And so that'll let the player know that you've got to come back once you've killed the Barons. So you already saw with the hallway that if you want an action to only happen when you enter a sector, you can use this special thing. So we're gonna make use of that again down here. Before we do that though, let's go ahead and let's start to write a brand new script for the exit. So below our Baron death script, I'm going to do a new script. We're going to call this, we'll just call this exit check, because this is basically checking whether the player has killed the Barons and has done enough to be able to exit the map. And we're going to go back to our all Barons dead function. So whenever we execute this script, basically whenever we enter this area, what we want to say is if all of the Barons are dead, in other words, if that is true, then let's show like a congratulations message. So let's do show notification. Good job. You may exit. Actually, I'm going to do a new line. So good job. You may exit. And then I don't want there to be a sound associated with that, so I'll type false. And then we're just going to lower those columns. Let's see, I've given those columns a tag of 2. So we're just similar to the bars in the supply room. We're just going to do floor, lower to lowest. Tag is 2, and we're going to give them a speed of 64, just like with the bars. So when the player enters that exit area, if all of the Barons have been killed, it's going to congratulate him and it's going to lower the column so that he can exit the map. Otherwise, so we're going to say else, we're going to tell him that he needs to come back. So we're going to say show notification. We're going to say condition not met. And then I'm going to do a new line. We're going to say Barons Barons not killed. And then we do want there to be a sound with this, just as an alert to say, hey, you need to come back. So I'm going to say true. And then end it with a semicolon. And we're going to come back to this, and I'll re-explain this. Before we explain it, though, what I want to do is go to this sector here, and I'm going to put that thing that I was talking about earlier, the actor intersector thing, because that's how we're going to activate this. So I'm going to go to my things list, expand the sector actions category, go to actor intersector. The action will be 80 script execute. It'll be a named script, and we want it to be exit check. And again, it doesn't matter where you place it as long as it's in the sector. I'm just going to put it sort of close here to the entrance. And let's go back and I'll explain it one more time, and then we'll test the map. So whenever we enter the sort of exit area, we're going to have a conditional statement that runs, and it's going to ask if all barons are dead. So that sort of hinges on this custom function that we wrote, which counts the things that have a tag of 666. If they're still alive, it returns false. If they're not, it returns true. But if the barons have both been killed, then it says good job, and it lowers the columns. If the barons have not been killed, in other words, if this else statement runs, then it's going to show the player this message that says condition not met, barons not killed, and it's going to play an alert message to just sort of get his attention and let him know you need to come back later. So we'll compile. You can see we didn't have any errors. And let's go ahead and play test the map. What I'm going to do, when we start out, I'm going to try and enter this area, and then I'm going to play the map all the way through. I'm going to go over here, get the collectibles, I'm going to kill the barons, and when it teleports us back up here, we're going to try and enter this area again and see if it allows us to exit. So here we go. Alright, so as you could see, when we tried to exit the map at the start, it sort of gave us that alert sound, and it told us we needed to come back. And then once I came down here and killed the barons and it teleported me back up, we were able to come back in here and the columns lowered and we were able to beat the map. So that just about sums up this tutorial. I do want to address one last problem though with the map. Like if you were taking this seriously as a map, there's one issue, and that is once you have killed these barons, you are still able to come back in here and drop down. And at that point, since there would be no barons to kill, there would be no way to teleport back up. So I'm going to make just a couple small changes. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this line here that leads into the baron room, and I'm just going to give this line a basic script that checks whether or not all the barons are dead. If they are, then whenever you cross over this line, it's just going to immediately teleport you back to the start. In other words, it's going to prevent you from even going into this room. So let's write a real quick script to do that. Let's go ahead and I'm just going to start a new script. We're going to call this, let's just call this Baron Den entry. It'll be a void script. And this is just going to be real simple. So when you try to enter the Baron Den, we're going to say if the barons have already been killed, so if all barons dead, then we're just going to teleport you back. So teleport 100, teleport the player back, and You know what? We can actually do a function for teleport because we've used this twice now, and since this is a common function to teleport the player back to the start, what we could do is we can come down. Let's just do a quick and easy function. This function is not going to return anything, and it's not going to take in anything. So we're going to do void. We're just going to call this function teleport to start. Again, it's not returning anything, it's not taking in anything, and all this is going to do is teleport the player to that destination of 1. And now, whenever we want to teleport the player back, instead of having to do this weird like teleport 100, which is it's not very readable or not understandable without some sort of comment, we can instead just say teleport to start. And look at how much easier that is to read and understand without needing some sort of comment or context. To me, that's much better. So let's do that here for our bear and den entry script that we were just working on. Teleport to start. And we're going to cover this again. I'm also just going to show the player a message. So if you try and go back in there when all the barons are dead, we're just going to let you know, hey, there's no need to go back in there. So show notification, I have no business. Let's just say I have no more business there. And we don't want there to be a sound, so I'll just do false. So to recap what we have done, I'm actually, before I finish this, I'm going to go to this line that I was talking about, and I'm going to give it the action. So I'm going to give it an action of 80. I'm going to say named script, and we're going to tie it to the bear and den entry that we just wrote, and it's going to be activated when the player walks over it, and it's going to be repeatable. So now, whenever the player crosses this line, it's going to execute the bear and den entry script. And this script is just going to check whether all the barons are dead. If they are, then we're just going to tell him, I have no more business there, and we're just going to send him back to the start. And again, that is just so that when you've killed these barons, you can't come back here and drop back down and just be stuck with no way up. It basically is not going to let you in there. I'm also going to just quickly change our warning message because currently this plays every time that we enter, and it's going to warn us even if we've already killed the barons, which doesn't really make much sense. I mean, if the barons are dead, why do we need to be warned? So we can just make a real quick and easy modification to our bear and den warning script. We don't even have to write a new script. So let's go to bear and den warning, and instead of just showing the notification every time, let's just make this part of a conditional statement. So let's just say if all the barons are dead, or actually let's put the, I showed you guys this earlier, the exclamation symbol. This is the not operator. So this is saying if all the barons are not dead. In other words, if this is not true, then we want to show him the warning message. So if all of the barons are not dead, warn the player. Otherwise, nothing's going to happen. So in other words, once we have played this map and dropped down in here and killed these guys, when we go back into this hallway, we're not going to be getting that bear and den ahead warning, because there's not going to be a need for that anymore. There's nothing left in there to threaten us as the player. And we've also got this line here that's going to, if we try and drop back down in there, it's just going to force us to teleport out if the barons have been killed. So that was an awful lot of talking, so now it's time to test this out. What I'm going to do is just perform a quick playthrough of the map. So here we go. This is going to be the last test of the video, and hopefully everything will work out correctly. Okay, so as you could clearly see there, the logic that we put in for the hallway worked. Whenever we tried to come back after we killed the Barons, we no longer got the warning. And when we tried to re-enter after we killed the Barons, it forced us to teleport back to the start, and we were told that we had no more business there. I did notice something a little funky with the sound repeating whenever we entered this exit area. I'm not 100% sure what caused that. It might have been that I stepped a little ways in and out, and maybe I tried to re-enter it or something, and that triggered it twice. But that aside, it mostly worked the way we wanted, and as usual, I apologize for making this so long-winded, and I also apologize if I got sidetracked too much and confused you guys. I hope I explained everything clearly and thoroughly, but if you still have any questions about functions, or if there's something that I didn't explain well that you're still confused about, feel free to leave a comment below, and I'd be glad to try and clear it up for you. But as always, I really appreciate you guys watching. I also meant to say I'm going to include this map in the video description. That way, if you guys want to download it and check it out and review the code, you can do that. But thank you for watching. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below. And this is Chubb signing out.